A couple of days later at the facility, Unit Bravo's patrols have found nothing new to help with the case, which means my being stuck at the warehouse has been for nothing. The kidnappings had continued whether I was out in display for the trappers to see or not. Now I'm pacing inside of a small meeting room at the facility waiting to hear my fate. I've got my fingers, toes, and any other flexible extremity crossed in the hopes that the chamber will finally let me out of my imprisonment. They may say it's for my benefit, but there's no way being cooped up in that place bored and practically alone is a benefit to anyone. I need to get back out there, to do something for these people, to make up for the ones I've already lost. But I can do nothing unless I have a babysitter with me, and none ever seem available. How convenient. I chase my shadow across the room, the constant buzz of the overhead fluorescent lights starting to give me a headache, but I continue pacing on. 10 more minutes pass and I eventually flop into the nearby chair. Then I stand up again. I do this a few times before sighing and rolling my eyes. I might as well do something to pass the time. Heading out into the hallway, I make a left to head towards the medical wing. I'm pretty sure Elodor should be on duty today, so we might be able to grab a bite to eat together again. Hopefully with less interruptions than last time. I pass by a few agents as I go, and they all offer smiles and hellos. It's certainly nice not to feel out of place, and I stride a little taller as I walk. A row of doors greets me at the end of the winding corridor. Checking over the rota notes, I find Elodor's name next to one of the examination rooms. After knocking and receiving no answer, I crack the door open a little and peer inside. Darkness has me blinking, the clinical smell wafting out with a wave of antiseptic that I shy away from. Elodor? My call goes unanswered. I back away, turning and gesturing at one of the nearby nurses. The man lifts one pink feathery eyebrow at me. His annoyed expression makes the line of iridescent scales running along his cheekbones shimmer. Can I help you? I place my hand on the handle of the examination room. Do you know where Elodor is? It says he's working today. Unfortunately not, he replies with a sniff, clasping his clipboard to his chest. He's been shirking off work for ages, landing the rest of us with extra duties. He continues to grumble something else, but confusion pulls me from the conversation. After the nurse is gone, I stare at the door with a shake of my head. Elodor always seems so dedicated to his work. It's kind of strange he'd just not bother showing up. Unease swirls deep in my stomach, but I suppress it. I don't know him well enough to really be sure that this isn't something he does regularly. Still, I glance back at the door, the unease spreading like a poison. But my worried thoughts are cut short at the sound of someone calling my name. Jules! Nat waves at me as she approaches, drawing my attention to her as I swing around. Hey, I reply as she nears. What's wrong? It's what's right that you should be asking about, she says, tucking her hands into her pockets and rocking back on her heels with a smile. The chamber are finally letting you out of the house, and alone, if you wanted. They concluded you're better off helping us than stuck not being able to do anything. I fall against the wall in relief. So, I'm finally free? Free? Her smile drops. You felt that trapped? My head bobs into a nod I can't stop. It's been a tough while, that's for sure. Well, at least it's at an end now. Can I go with you anywhere? She lifts her hands out of her pocket to hold them up. As a friend, not a guard. I chuckle. Sure, I'm going to head to the station. I'm already dreading how much there's going to be to catch up on. We fall into easy step beside each other as we head down the hallway. I glance back over my shoulder to the empty examination room, my worries trailing after me like a looming shadow as we go. There had been whispers about just how quiet things had been, like the calm before the storm, but I did my best to ignore those comments. At the station, I stretch in my desk chair as I sink into it. The springs are poking into my thighs, but I'm actually thankful to be back in this uncomfortable seat. Leaving you alone after everything that's happened seems unwise, Nat says, frowning at me with concern shining through the depths of her brown eyes. Hmm. Hmm. Well, I actually agree with her, so none of these answers are good. Hmm. I mean, I guess we'll go with that one. I shake my head at her worries. It's better to try and get back to normal. I shrug a shoulder, or as normal as my life can be these days. Routine helps. And you're basing that on what? A real psychological basis? She asks with a raised brow. Well, no, but it sounds kind of legit, right? I ask with a sheepish wince. She frowns, concern once again making her shoulders nod. Not even slightly. I just need to get out, okay? I haven't had the chance to leave the warehouse in ages. I get up from my desk with a sigh, walking to her side. I need a break from it. That's something I can understand, she says, relenting with a shrug. I'll see you later. I won't be staying late, I reassure her. She gives a final wave before heading out of my office. As I watch the vampire leave, I fold my arms and draw in a breath. I thought I would be thankful for the space away from Unit Bravo after the past week, but instead I feel a pang of emptiness at the idea of having to be away. Well, you don't have to be away, you did this to yourself. Just as the doors swing closed, the ones at the back of the station swing open. I turn and spy Verda coming up from the basement, his face weary from work. At least I hope it's just to work. Things seem to end on a better note after dinner, but I still haven't had the chance to speak to him since then to see how he's feeling. Now is a good time as any, so I head over to meet him in the kitchen area. Well, sure, we'll go with that. I make to step into the cubicle-like kitchen as Verda flicks on the kettle, but I pause before invading the space. Have you got a minute? I ask. I have a few, he replies, looking over his shoulders at me with an unexpected smile before returning his focus to readying his tea bag. You're welcome to fill them all. Oh. His reaction puts me on the back foot, but I recover with a sudden bubble of hope, stepping into the space beside him. How are things? Not quite as terrifying anymore, he admits, though I can see the reply tugged tightly at his expression. Meeting your vampire helped. I glance warily about the practically empty station, thankful no one was nearby to hear that. I'm glad. It definitely showed me that supernaturals are much like us. He turns off the kettle as it begins to frantically shake with boiling water. There are bad ones, there are good ones, there are ones that fit in the middle. Do you think that's a correct conclusion to come to? Yeah, sure. I give a nod at his assessment. Pretty much, from what I've seen, they're not that much different from humans. It's just some have fangs, he says, his tone light but a little strained. Still, it's nice not to feel the bristling tension between us that have been like a third wheel since you'd found out. Not all of them. Some have scales or tails, I reply with a smile. Of course they do. He attempts to laugh. So, what happens now? I ask, taking a seat at the small table. He joins me, grabbing a coaster and placing down his mug with care. I try to learn more. The best way to solve anything is research. If only Nat could be here to hear you say that. You would have made her day, I say with a half smile. I'm actually glad it's just us, he admits, glancing up as he sips at his drink. He flinches away slightly from the hot liquid before blowing on it. I'm interested to know more about this agency you work for, the ones who seem to govern the supernaturals. I shift my gaze up. I don't think they govern all of them, just the ones who sign treaties. Treaties? I groan as the events with the Ma Alicid spring to the forefront of my mind. It's a long story. But what about the agency itself? They have all these people working for them, including you. His brows hitch up a little. And with resources at their disposal by the sounds of it. Of course, Verda's interest would be piqued. It's easy to tell he misses working in a big city. Wayhaven is slow. Too slow for someone of his intellect and interests. The Chamber had certainly seemed interested in his skills. They would likely make a good match. But still, it would throw Verda into that world. A dangerous world. I will encourage his interest in the agency. Resources are something they definitely have, I reply with a firm nod. You should see some of the technology they have to hand. Most of it fueled by magic I don't even understand. Magic? His hands tighten around his mug as he leans closer. They could do that? Yes, their science department is pretty impressive from what I hear. I barely need to nudge for his eyes to gleam with real interest. He leans back, looking down into his mug, his features smoothing as his thoughts seem to raise. Interesting. I get up from my seat and rest a hand on his shoulder. It's nice to talk like this again, Verda. He smiles up at me, resting his fingers over my own. It is. I've missed it. I leave him to mull over his thoughts, my encouragement obviously further helping him to push past his fear and make my way through the station. My smile drops when my gaze falls on the board standing prominently to one side of my office. I'd done well at ignoring it the first time I'd entered, but now it glares at me. Guilt wants to dig its stinging claws into me, but I grit my teeth and force myself to walk inside, even under the weight of all the eyes staring out from the board. I sit on the edge of my desk, staring right back at them. All the photos of the missing people. People missing because of me. The trappers have been busy while I was gone. Dozens of new faces have been added to the others already burned into my memory. Someone makes a loud touching sound from the doorway, and it takes me a moment to recognize the voice. Bobby saunters into the room, staring over the board with a forced sigh, before letting her gaze drift to me. So much has happened since you became detective, hasn't it? I stay silent, my focus drawn by the faces staring at me hauntingly from the photos. And even more since the unit Bravo you're so fond of appeared. She angles in closer. All that bad energy must be really tiring you out. Turning my head, I lift a brow, wondering just where she's planning on taking this. She smiles, lifting her hand to brush it against my jawline. I could always help you work out some of that energy if you wanted. Or maybe you just want to talk it out. What specifically are you referring to with that? Hmm. Wow, I say, shaking my head as I glance at the ceiling in disbelief. Is there any opportunity you won't use to boost your career? Her teeth grind together. I just asked if you wanted to talk. No, you propositioned me, then asked if I wanted to talk. I cock my head. Because you want to use what you think is my vulnerable state to drag information from me. I can't tell if she tenses from annoyance that I saw through her act or anger that her ploy didn't work. She twists around to storm out, pausing in the doorway and looking back to me. I'm not completely heartless, you know? Your actions would say otherwise, I remind her. She actually flinches at my response, dropping her gaze with a pained frown. Maybe we all just cope with fear differently. Hmm. Sure. I sputter a laugh at her words, unable to believe that she's trying to use fear as an excuse. So you're actually trying to make me believe it's fear that makes you manipulate everyone around you. I don't, she begins to protest, but she notices my brows arched in disbelief and lets out a long breath instead. From what I hear, you were like this long before. Oh, I see. From what I hear, you were like this long before any of these horrors started plaguing this town, I say, walking around my desk to take my seat as she fumbles for a response. Her uncertain gaze lingers on me for a long moment before she drags it away, grinding her teeth. I should get going. She makes her way out with another word, and I'm finally left to my own company. Approaching evening somewhere deep in the forest. Sin stands with his back against a tree. It would provide little protection if something should truly want to harm him, but it feels good to have something solid at his back. He certainly does not get such a thing from his leash holder. The leash holder carefully folds down the edge of some black paper, creasing it into knife-sharp lines before pulling it taut around the edge of a large flat box. You believe this will be enough to entice the human to you? Sin asks. His baritone voice disturbs the chiming music provided by the woman's phone. Cesaire's lips lift into a smile. The expression is as deadly as the glinting scissors she wields. The blades of the metal tool slide through golden ribbons with no resistance, just as she likes all things to yield. How could they resist such an invitation? The leash keeper asks. The ribbon curls against the black paper before she twists them up into a large configuration of shimmering coils. My auctions are some of the most prestigious. Sin shifts. Do you truly wish for their presence? Cesaire pauses. I do. She swings around to face Sin. Everyone is interested in this human. Think of the prestige we could have if they joined my little team. But you were so intent on selling their life force. Sin shakes his head. How quickly the motivations of humans can change. His head whirls at the thought. Why wish for them at your side now? Options, Sin. It gives me options. She steps back to admire the black wrapped box on the makeshift table. If they join me, people will be drawn to our auctions in their masses just because of them being there. To marvel at them. Think of how much money we'll make then. A question bubbles in Sin's throat, but he hesitates to ask it. He does not wish to know the answer, but it falls free anyway. And if they will not join you? A smile slices across Cesaire's face. Then we get to sell every drop of their blood and make a fortune that way. And how will you know for sure the human is with you? Cesaire tilts her head, pressing her fingers to her chin to examine her work. That is why I kidnapped their supernatural friend. Repulsion stirs within Sin, and he can feel something snap inside of him. A thread. Just one, but it's like the bar of a cage snapping. Cesaire bows forwards in order to place the sleek envelope against a cushion of gold ribbon, and then she steps back. You know where this has to go, she says. Sin stares at the box. He knows what his keeper asks of him, but for a second he resists. Shock pulls through him, as well as a lightning force of freedom. Sin? Cesare repeats with more force. 1,000 needles pierce into Sin's back and flood away the hope of before. I do, he answers finally. Late afternoon at the station. Leaning back in my chair, I tap the keyboard of my computer and the monitor springs to life. 2 stacks of papers balance in my trays, covered in a whole host of colorful sticky notes. At least the work will keep my mind off of everything else. Later that day, in the early evening. Standing, I stretch out my limbs. One thing I didn't miss while I was away was the uncomfortable office furniture. As the niggles and knots loosen from my spine, the wounds still healing over my body begin to ache, forcing me to hunch over with a wince. That's when I decide it's definitely time to head back. I grab up my keys, say goodbye to the arriving night shift volunteer, and walk out into the balmy evening air. The drive back to the warehouse is as uneventful as I'd hoped it would be. Nothing but trees and the spread of warming sunset colors to welcome me home. At least my temporary home. Something I have to keep reminding myself of lately. It's been so easy to blend into the life of vampires that I forgot I've only been living with them for a short while, not the years it feels like. I park near the wire fence, sliding my ID card over the panel so that the gate swings open. I'm so used to the motions by now that I do them almost on instinct. And with everything so very familiar to me, it means the oddities stand out so much more. Such as the large black box set in front of the cracked wooden side door of the warehouse's facade. The glimmering gold bow has been tied around the box bow, and a matching black card is nestled amongst the puff of material. On the card is a sweep of intricate gold lettering that swirls across the black paper, and what it reads sends the dread chill of terror through me, freezing me to my core. Next chapter.